This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
If you were asked to name a wonder material, what would you say? Silicon? Plastics? Maybe graphene? All good choices. But for people in the mid-1900s, the choice would have been clear. Asbestos. That might seem like a shocking answer. Isn't asbestos deadly? Yes, it causes terrible lung diseases. It's every bit as bad as you have heard. But that is not the full story. Asbestos probably saved far more lives than it cost, millions of them. And in a wider sense, it remade the entire world. Asbestos isn't just a historical relic either. Odds are there's asbestos in your home or office right now. As much as we'd like to, the world simply cannot forget asbestos. From the Science History Institute, this is Sam Keene and the Disappearing Spoon, a topsy-turvy, science-y history podcast, where footnotes become the real story. Many people feel, however vaguely, that natural things are better and more wholesome than artificial things. Artificial things seem dangerous. They pollute the environment and poison us. But asbestos complicates that tidy division. Asbestos is both deadly and wholly natural. It comes right from Mother Nature, just like cotton and wood. Asbestos is made of the same material as sand, silicon dioxide. It forms when silicon dioxide dissolves in hot water and precipitates out under high pressure. Microscopically, it's made of very thin fibers, like cotton candy. A strand the thickness of a human hair contains 2 million fibers. A string 100 yards long weighs less than an ounce. We don't know how people first discovered asbestos, but here is one guess. Sometimes, after forest fires, the landscape will look scorched and black. Except for lumps of asbestos sitting there, white and untouched. It's completely impervious to fire. Just like cotton, asbestos fibers can be woven into cloth. It has a silky sheen, and it feels slippery to the touch. People have been weaving asbestos for 5,000 years, mostly for applications that require heat resistance. The ancient Greeks wrapped bodies in asbestos on funeral pyres to keep the person's ashes separate from the fire's ashes. Ancient Romans made lamps for Vestal Virgins with asbestos wicks. As long as you kept the lamp supplied with oil, the wicks burned forever. Aside from these uses, however, people mostly used asbestos as a party trick. For instance, Charlemagne had an asbestos tablecloth that he would spread out for banquets. You can imagine how it looked after a night of revelry, smeared with boar grease, soaked with wine. But Charlemagne simply tossed it into a fire, and voila! All the stains would burn away, while the white cloth emerged pure and spotless, cleaner than ever. People invented all sorts of stories to explain where asbestos came from. Some said it was made from the feathers of the phoenix, the mythical bird that arose from its own ashes. Others swore it came from the fur of so-called fire rats that lived inside volcanoes. In Jerusalem, merchants would sell swatches of asbestos cloth to pilgrims, claiming they were scraps from the holy shroud that Jesus was buried in. The fact that it didn't burn was proof of its miraculous nature. Still, a few ancient historians did know where asbestos came from: mines. And those historians often mention the material in ominous terms. One ancient Greek writer advised never buying an enslaved person who had worked in an asbestos mine. They always died within a few years. Asbestos probably would have remained a mere curiosity if not for the Industrial Revolution. That revolution was powered largely by steam. Steam engines needed insulating jackets, and fireproof asbestos was the best insulator known. The Industrial Revolution also drew millions of people into cities. Their new homes were slapdash structures made of wood, and they were jam-packed together. Given that people carried lanterns and cooked over open hearths, fires were inevitable. You've probably heard of the Great Chicago Fire. But in truth, every city had a Great Fire way back when, sometimes 2 or 3. The solution to these fires was asbestos. You could insulate buildings made of wood with it, or mix it into concrete to make that fire resistant. There were also asbestos shingles, asbestos tiles, and asbestos paint to coat walls with. More than any other country, the United States embraced asbestos for homes, hotels, hospitals, schools, and more. The U.S. Capitol once gleamed with asbestos paint. Throughout the 1900s, the U.S. consumed 30 million tons of asbestos overall, 60 billion pounds. And pretty much every building erected between 1900 and 1980, public or private, commercial or residential, used loads of asbestos. Not coincidentally, fire deaths dropped by 90% over that same time. Before long, asbestos found its way into consumer goods. Some of these applications make sense. Toasters, ironing boards, hair dryers. Others, though, leave you scratching your head a bit. Companies made fake decorative Christmas snow from asbestos. Brewers strained beer through asbestos filters. Manufacturers made gutters and downspouts from it, products that don't exactly seem like fire hazards. There was even asbestos-laced toothpaste. In all, some 4,000 consumer goods contained asbestos. Saying that your product contained asbestos made it sound modern and high-tech. Asbestos equaled progress. Asbestos even appeared in comic books. One superhero in the Fantastic Four universe was named the Human Torch. And one nemesis was the Asbestos Lady. She robbed banks and escaped by lighting fires that police crews could not cross. But she could cross them in her asbestos bodysuit. Despite all the hype, a few clear-eyed doctors noticed that asbestos seemed hazardous to people's health. Sadly, the only people who paid attention were insurance executives. As early as 1918, insurance companies were denying coverage to workers in asbestos factories. They deemed them too risky. One case in particular highlights the plight of these factory workers. Nellie Kershaw was born near Manchester, England in 1891. She had warm eyes, thick brown hair, and plump cheeks. At age 12, she dropped out of school and soon began working in an asbestos factory. There, she managed the machines that twisted thin strands of asbestos into thicker threads. Given the wrenching of the threads, the machines produced dust, which Kershaw inhaled day in and day out for 2 decades. That dust consisted of thin, wavy, microscopic fibers, like wrinkly toothpicks. Kershaw's nose and throat would have trapped most of those fibers, but some fibers slip through and burrow into lung tissue. When your body cannot clear them out, that causes inflammation and scarring. This in turn leaves the lung tissues stiff, which makes it hard to breathe. One doctor compared the damage to a spider crisscrossing the lungs with a web of scar tissue until the victim is slowly strangled. This damage finally caught up with Kershaw in 1920. A few years earlier, she had married a tiler named Frank and had a daughter, but she never really recovered from the birth. She constantly felt tired and began coughing up blood. Over the next 2 years, her lungs deteriorated until she essentially collapsed on the job. She retired to a sickbed at age 31, scarcely able to breathe, a torturous feeling of constant suffocation. She also suffered night sweats and rapidly lost weight, leaving her with sunken eyes and a skeletal frame. Sadly, Kershaw eventually gave up seeing doctors because it did no good. No one could help her. Her factory and its insurance company refused to compensate her. They said that helping out workers would set a, quote, dangerous precedent. The British government eventually came through with a pittance, 7 shillings per week, around $19 today. Kershaw died nearly destitute in 1924, at age 33. Kershaw underwent an autopsy, and the coroner must have been startled at what he saw. The scarred lung tissue of asbestos victims often turns gray or even blue-black, like a bruise. Coroners have even reported hearing their scalpels grate or rasp when they cut in. The tissue is that full of mineral grit. When the coroner examined Kershaw's lung tissues under a microscope, he found fibers that looked exactly like fibers from her factory. When confronted with this evidence, the factory owners promised that they would shape up. From that day forward, they would provide better working conditions with masks and good ventilation. Of course, they did nothing of the sort. And those measures were too late anyway for the hundreds of people who had already put in many years there. As a result, their workers continued to suffer and die. Eventually, under pressure, the factory did pay £88,000 to 140 workers between 1931 and 1948. That's around £628 each, or $35,000 today. Meanwhile, shareholders in the firm profited to the tune of £7 million during that same time, close to $400 million today. And yet, despite many cases like Kershaw's, asbestos never became the public health scare that you might expect. But why? Certainly, you can blame the usual things: money, powerful special interests, cowardly politicians. But that's not the whole story. People also willingly looked away. So many of them had endured so many infernos. They had seen their homes torched, their lives and loved ones burned to cinders, that they were willing to put up with the danger of asbestos. Compared to another city-gutting fire, some poor, wheezing factory workers seemed like a small price to pay. Only in the 1960s, when one man made it his crusade to eliminate asbestos, did anything change.
Plan on flying? It's time to upgrade to a Real ID. Because in order to board domestic flights, your driver's license or state-issued ID must be a Real ID, or you'll need another acceptable form of identification. So don't wait. Find out how to get your Real ID at tsa.gov/Real ID. That's tsa.gov/Real ID, or visit your local DMV. And then you'll be cleared for takeoff.
Irving Selikoff was born to a Russian family in New York City in 1915. Selikoff wanted to be a doctor, and he was bright enough to attend Columbia University for undergrad. But American medical schools had quotas for Jews then, so he had to pursue his MD in Scotland instead. After returning to New York, Selikoff specialized in chest ailments. His work on tuberculosis won him a Lasker Prize, a medical award second only to the Nobel Prize in prestige. In the early 1960s, he opened a clinic in Paterson, New Jersey. The Asbestos Workers Union asked him if it could start referring patients to him. He agreed, figuring it never hurt to pick up a few patients. But it wasn't just a few, and the poor health of these workers stunned him. 14 of his new patients had either a type of lung scarring called fibrosis, or else a rare lung cancer called mesothelioma. Both conditions were resistant to treatment, and all 14 men died within a few years. Disturbed, Selikoff began trying to get medical records from older patients to see how long asbestos workers had been suffering. Factory owners refused to help him, so he somehow accessed an FBI list of asbestos workers with security clearances from World War II work. He then traced patients that way. He also scoured medical journals for cases like Nellie Kershaw's. What he found shocked him. Dozens of reports linked asbestos to cancer and lung damage, but no one seemed to care. So Selikoff made it his life's mission to raise the alarm about asbestos. He began working 18-hour days. Colleagues dreaded his phone calls at dawn, demanding help. He published reports, and he exchanged anguished letters with victims, documenting their suffering. He also wrote letters from everyone to Supreme Court justices to Mikhail Gorbachev, begging them to listen. And slowly, people did, because asbestos was scarily good at killing people. The fibers could even cross a mother's placenta and infect a fetus. One victim died of lung cancer after working with asbestos for just 3 months. In some cases, even the relatives of people who worked at asbestos plants fell victim due to dust they brought home on their clothes. One poor woman saw her husband die of cancer and then watched her adult daughter, who had been a mere child when the husband worked at an asbestos factory, die of the same cancer just 3 months later. Selikoff's tireless work between the 1960s and 1990s led to $70 billion in lawsuits. And in the public imagination, asbestos flipped from wonder material to deadly poison. Remember the comic book villain, Lady Asbestos, who robbed banks and started fires to evade the police? Asbestos even got her. In her final mention in the comic, she dies of mesothelioma at age 45. Still, while Selikoff certainly deserves credit for sounding the alarm on asbestos, it's possible that society would have continued to avert its eyes if we had not made big strides in fighting fires. Better water systems, alternative fire suppression materials, things like that. Frankly, scorning asbestos is a luxury, and one we should not take for granted. And we're still dealing with the problem of asbestos today. The EPA estimates that 700,000 buildings in the United States alone still have asbestos inside, including up to 45,000 schools. Pretty much every building erected between 1900 and 1980, public or private, commercial or residential, probably contains some. And while it might seem obvious that we should charge in and rip all that asbestos out, that's actually a bad idea. Tearing asbestos out would create dust, and breathing in that dust would cause widespread lung damage. As a result, it's usually safer to let this sleeping dragon lie. If there's asbestos in your home or office, however scary that feels, if it's left alone, it likely won't hurt anyone. Thanks to Selikoff, most industrialized nations have banned asbestos today. In the United States, you could still use it in the brake pads of cars until that practice was banned in 2024. Still, the material has hardly disappeared. India and China still use it by the ton, and it still causes 250,000 deaths per year worldwide. Almost no material in history has undergone such a reversal in fortune as asbestos, from magical wonder material to cursed carcinogen. And in the end, it's impossible to measure whether it did more good than harm. Think of Nellie Kershaw suffocating on her sickbed, her little daughter weeping. Then again, think of all the infernos averted because of it. Charles Dickens famously opened A Tale of Two Cities by saying it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. The asbestos time was both. This is the Disappearing Spoon podcast, brought to you by the Science History Institute. Be sure to check out their in-depth science history podcast, Distillations. You can find it anywhere you get your podcasts, or on their website, distillations.org. You can find more incredible stories in my books or at samkeen.com. You can also book me as a speaker there for your school or event. If you like this podcast, please spread the word and support it at patreon.com/disappearingspoon. You can also get bonus episodes and signed books at Patreon. This episode was written by me, Sam Keen. It was produced by Mariel Carr, Rigoberto Hernandez, and Sarah Kaplan. Our sound design, scoring, and mixing is by Justin Berger of Row Home Productions. Row Home's creative director is Alex Lewis. John Myers is Row Home's executive producer. Thanks for listening.
Row Home Productions.
Plan on flying? In order to board domestic flights, your driver's license or state-issued ID must be a real ID. Learn how to get your real ID today at tsa.gov/realid or visit your local DMV.
Have you ever wondered why onions make you cry?
Or how soap gets your hands clean?
What really is margarine?
Or why do trees change color in the fall?
I'm a chemist, and to answer these questions, I started a podcast called Chemistry for Your Life.
In each episode, Melissa explains the chemistry behind one of life's mysteries to me. And I'm definitely not a chemist, but she explains it in a way that's easy to understand and totally fascinating.
If you're someone who loves learning new things or who wonders about the way the world works, then check out Chemistry for Your Life, available wherever you listen to podcasts.